Hey there, chemistry students. So in our first unit here, we're talking about lab equipment at the moment, and we're working on our target of being able to describe the proper use of some basic lab equipment. And to that end, one of the activities that I like to do here at this part of the unit is what I call the equipment lab. Okay, and the equipment lab isn't so much like a lab where we're going to go and play with some chemicals as it is an opportunity to get up and take a look at some of the lab equipment and describe, what it's used for, how it's used, those sorts of things, right? And so as we do this equipment lab here, you should have a copy of the lab. It might be on paper, it might be a digital copy. I have here a paper copy. And what we'll do in this video is take a look at some of the equipment. I'll show it to you in the video. If you are in the classroom, then you can go ahead and take a look at it in the classroom. And we'll answer some of the questions that are on here so that we know what we're talking about here, right? Taking a look at the assignment there, if you look, the first part there's an introduction, and you should read that. Go ahead and read that. Pause the video if you need to read through that. And then after that, there are some pre-lab discussion questions. There are 3 of them there. So let's take a look at these pre-lab discussion questions and we'll answer them. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the equipment that we need to look at for the lab. Okay, so the first question on here, there's 3 questions. The first one, it says, what types of measurements do you think you might need to make in the chemistry lab? And there are several things we might measure in a chemistry lab. Probably one of the more common is the volume of a liquid. And if you remember from the last video, we would use what's called a graduated cylinder to do that. We might want to measure the mass or the weight of a substance. And if you remember from the last video, we might use a scale to do that. Another good one, temperature. We might want to measure the temperature of something. And of course, we would use a thermometer for that. So, there's several things that we might write down as an answer to that question there. Those are all good ones. The volume of a liquid, the mass of something, or the temperature of something. The second question here, it says, what types of equipment would you need to make those measurements? And like we just mentioned, for the volume, you would use a graduated cylinder. For a mass, you would use a scale. For a temperature, a thermometer. And the third question, it says, why do you think there are several types of glassware marked for measuring? And if you remember in the last video, we talked about, for the volume of a liquid, we use a graduated cylinder. That's the tool that we use to measure the volume of the liquid. But, beakers and flasks are also marked, right? And we talked about that those markings on beakers and flasks aren't that accurate. They're there to give us just a general impression of how much is in that container. And so there are several different types of glassware marked for measuring so that we can, kind of keep track of how much is in each one. Maybe you put your liquid from the graduated cylinder into the beaker, and then, you can kind of keep track of how much is in there. Something like that would be a good answer to that question. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at some of the equipment in the lab here. We'll go through this, we'll take a look at each thing, and we'll talk about what it's used for, how to set it up, all those sorts of things. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, let's take a look at some of the equipment on our assignment here. You should have your lab handout, and if you look on the second page of that, you can see there's all these pictures here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each one of these and talk about what is it called, what is it used for. And on your assignment, they want you to write its name, draw a little picture of it, and kind of describe what its use is. And we're not necessarily going to look at these in order because some of them go together. So we'll kind of look at the ones that go together at the same time. But the first one, picture A, you can see here, this is what's called an Erlenmeyer flask, right? And you can see on there, the first one is done for you. So A is the Erlenmeyer flask, and then you can see a picture of it there. And then what is it used for? We talked about in the last video, we talked about a flask. We can use it to hold our chemicals. We can use it to mix some things together, to have them react. We can use it for several different things. And if you look on what's done for you, it says we can use this to measure, mix, and hold liquids in the lab, right? The other thing that we can do with this is to use this piece of equipment, which is Picture V. Picture V is what's called a funnel. It's a glass funnel, right? And we can put this in the flask and use it to funnel or filter some things. So Picture V, it's called a funnel. What does it call it? A funnel or a glass funnel? I think it calls it a glass funnel. I'll look on there and see. And what is it used for? It's used to either funnel or filter some things. So there is your Erlenmeyer flask, Picture A, and your funnel, Picture V. Here you can see Picture B. Picture B, this is what's called an evaporating dish, right? An evaporating dish, if I have something that I want to evaporate away, I can put it in the evaporating dish and let it sit there for a while and evaporate. Fun story, don't try to heat these, they will crack and fall apart, right? So that is Picture B, the evaporating dish, and it's used to allow something to evaporate. Here we can see Picture C. Picture C is what's called a watch glass. You can see it's just a piece of glass. It's like a glass dish, right? It's called a watch glass. And what do you use a watch glass for? Well, generally to kind of watch something. So if I got something like this, I can put this in here and watch it. I happen to like starting fires in them, so you know. This is the watch glass, Picture C. This right here is a different one. This one is Picture O. It's called a scoopula, right? And what is a scoopula used for? It's used to scoop things out, right? It's used to move a substance, usually a solid substance, right? So I moved some of this here, copper nitrate, into the watch glass, and I can watch it. And like I said, I kind of like to start fires in these. So here I have some alcohol, and I have another one of the pictures here. This is what's called a pipette. Picture T. Picture T is called a pipette. This particular one is called a disposable pipette because it's cheap plastic and we can throw it away when we're done. So I'm going to take my pipette. And what's a pipette used for? It's used for moving a liquid. So I'm going to put some of that in there. I'm going to put my alcohol at a safe distance. And then I'll have a little fun here. There we go. All right. So we had Picture C, which was the watch glass. We had Picture O, which was the scoopula. And we had Picture T, which was the pipette. Hopefully in a second you'll see some blue fire here. I don't know how well you can see it on the video. Glare. Anyway, some neat stuff there. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit here. You can see we have here Picture O. Picture O is what's called the beaker. And there we have a beaker, and I've put a little bit of water in the beaker. You might use a beaker to hold some chemicals. You might use it to mix some chemicals in there, see a reaction, something like that. So that's Picture O, a beaker. And then I also have Picture F here. Picture F is what we call it forceps, right? You might be more used to calling it something like tweezers. It looks like tweezers, right? We call them forceps. And we use forceps to pick up something that maybe you don't want to touch and move it somewhere else. Like for example here I have some calcium. I don't really want to touch the calcium with my fingers, so I'm going to use the forceps to pick it up and put it in the water. Hopefully you can see it reacts with the water. You can see it bubbling and fizzing in there. Down over here. So there we had picture O, the beaker, and picture F, the forceps. Okay, here we're gonna have quite a few of the pictures here. What I have right here is picture P. Picture P is what's called a ring stand. This is a ring stand. You see it's got a base, and then it's got a metal rod in there. And we can put some things on the ring stand to hold them. A ring stand, it's used to hold stuff up, right? And on my ring stand, I'm gonna put picture, which one is it? F. Picture F is a ring clamp. Right. I'm gonna put my ring clamp on there. And you can see it holds up my ring clamp, right? And what does my ring clamp do? It holds some stuff up, okay? And underneath my ring clamp, I'm gonna put picture I. Picture I is a Bunsen burner. We saw a Bunsen burner in the last video. I'm not going to put the hose on it, I'm just going to put the Bunsen burner here. And what's a Bunsen burner used for? It's used for heating some stuff where we might need fire. Okay. And I'm going to put onto that picture X. Picture X, this is what's called clay triangle. Clay triangle, we could put that up here, and we can heat that, and the clay triangle will not burn, right? So it's a good place to put something to support something. Right, so the clay triangle sits up there and supports something. What kind of thing can it support? It can support picture H. Picture H is what's called a crucible. The picture, it doesn't have the lid on there. I have the lid here, right? And you can put the lid on there, and you can put this on top of the clay triangle, above the Bunsen burner. See if we can get it all in the picture there. There you go. And you can heat what's in the crucible. The crucible is used for heating things, and you can heat things to very high temperatures in the crucible, right? So you can put your Bunsen burner underneath it, it'll heat up what's in there, make it nice and hot. There's some other stuff we can use with this kind of setup. Instead of the crucible, and instead of the clay triangle, I can have here, it's called a wire mesh with ceramic center. Because it's a wire mesh with a ceramic center. And we could put that on our ring. And then we can put something else up there, like say maybe you remember my beaker, right? The wire mesh is picture D. Picture D is the wire mesh. And then the beaker again was picture O. We can put this up here and put it on top of the wire mesh and heat it with the Bunsen burner, like so. So there was picture D, the wire mesh with ceramic center, picture F, the ring clamp, picture H, the crucible, picture I, the Bunsen burner, picture P, the ring stand, and picture X, the clay triangle. So there was quite a few of them right there. Okay, so after heating my beaker, maybe I don't want to touch it because it's hot, so but I want to pick it up and move it, so I'm going to use picture K. Picture A is what's called the beaker tongs. We can use the beaker tongs to pick up a beaker when it's hot. Picture K, the beaker tongs. Maybe I want to know what its temperature is now, so I'm going to use picture U. Picture U is the thermometer. You remember from last time, the thermometer comes in a case. Make sure you take it out of the case, and then we can put it in our liquid and measure its temperature. Maybe I need to stir up whatever's in there, right? I want to stir it. And so I'm going to use picture W. Picture W is what's called the glass stir rod. It's really just a glass stick, right? And we can put it in there and we can stir up whatever's in there. So there's a few different ones here. We've got the beaker tongs, picture K, the beaker tongs. We've got picture U, the thermometer, and we've got picture W, the glass stir rod. In our last video, we talked a little bit about test tubes, and we talked about safety with test tubes. Never point a test tube at somebody, right? The test tube is picture N on your assignment there. A test tube, you can use it to hold some chemicals. You can use it to mix some chemicals together, something along those lines. Picture N, the test tube. Test tube often used with picture S. Picture S is the test tube holder, test tube stand, right? And we can take our test tube and put it in the test tube holder. And what's a test tube holder used for? It's used for holding test tubes, right? And then we have picture R. Picture R is called the test tube clamp or test tube holder. I don't remember exactly what it calls it on here. Test tube holder, it calls it. Yeah, test tube holder. And the test tube holder can be used, it'll go right there on the test tube, and you can pick up the test tube and easily move it. Maybe your test tube's hot. You don't want to pick it up, so you move it with the test tube holder. So here we have picture S, the test tube rack. We have picture N, the test tube. And we have picture R, the test tube holder. Okay, a few other ones here that, I didn't squeeze into any of the groups. This one right here is picture L. It's called a mortar and pestle. Mortar and pestle is used for grinding things up. You can put something in there and then use it to grind it up, right? That's a mortar and pestle. It's used for grinding things. I hope everybody recognizes picture J. Picture J is a ruler. I think it calls it a metric ruler on there. Rulers have a metric side and an imperial side. We use the metric side in science, right? So picture J, the ruler. It's used for measuring a length. And then picture M is a graduated cylinder. We saw the graduated cylinder in the video the other day. The graduated cylinder is used for measuring the volume of a liquid. So we put a liquid in there and we can measure its volume based on the scale there. So there we have the mortar and pestle, picture L. We have the ruler, picture J. And we have the graduated cylinder, picture M. And I think the only other one on here is picture G, which is an apron. I don't have an apron, but I do have my fancy lab coat, right? So that's picture G. What's it used for? It's used for keeping us safe in the lab. So there's those ones. Okay, so we've taken a look at each of the pieces of equipment there in the lab handout. And at the very end, there is a section that's titled Analysis and Conclusions, and it's asking you to, it says, what tool or tools would you use to make each of the following measurements? What's the unit of measurement for each tool, right? So the first one, A, it says the amount of milk in a small glass. What tool would you use to measure that amount? And to measure that, I would use a graduated cylinder, and it would measure in milliliters. B, it says the length of a maple leaf. What tool would you use to measure the length of a maple leaf? I would use the ruler, and it would measure in centimeters. And then C, the temperature of the water in a lake. To measure temperature, of course, you would use the thermometer. The thermometer would measure in degrees Celsius. And D, the mass of a sea turtle. Mass, you would use a scale. We didn't see that in this lab, but we saw it in the last video. And the scale, our scales would measure in grams, but I would imagine a sea turtle would probably measure in kilograms. So those are those analysis and conclusions questions. Okay, so we've taken a look at the equipment, we've answered the questions. Hopefully that helps us to be able to describe the use of some of the basic lab equipment. Until next time, take it easy.